Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. A couple of weeks ago, I covered the big changes in the April patch. Though now that it's officially out, I want to do a bit of a spotlight video for this one, focusing on a civ that got a pretty extensive overhaul, the Vikings. Now, I did a civ overview on them a little over a month ago, and naturally they received some of the most changes of any civilization in the patch. Classic. We can consider this an addendum to that overview, going over 4 major changes they received in depth to put those into perspective with some testing and examples of course, and also talk about where this leaves Vikings as a whole. To set the stage, heading into the new patch, Vikings were recently performing 8th best in 1v1 Arabia. On the flip side, in team games, they tend to struggle a bit more, though I think one of the changes coming in particular may actually help them in those games a surprising amount. Like I said, there's 4 significant changes we'll be covering in this video, and to start off, the first is that I'd argue they're one of the biggest beneficiaries of the continued push to buff the Swordsmen-line. Presumably, you're familiar with the new tech Gambizons at this point, and in my opinion, Vikings benefit more than almost any other civilization from it. The tech adds 1 pierce armor to the longsword in Castle Age, extending through to the champion, and when I recently looked at it in depth, the main takeaway was that against very high damage range units, it has little to no effect. But against cheap, low attack units, it can be pretty dramatic. For example, against crossbows with 7 attack, it reduces the damage they take by 25%, making the militia line better against one of their main counters. Even more importantly though, I'd argue, is how it cuts damage taken by elite skirmishers in half, assuming you have the other infantry armor upgrades. Now, you might wonder why anyone would make skirmishers against longswords, but remember Vikings are largely played as a crossbow civilization, so running into skirmishers is not that unexpected. Of course, their infantry also have 20% more HP, so instead of a generic longsword taking 30 javelins to defeat, a Viking fully upgraded longsword takes 72. While I suspect resistance to skirmishers was not the main intention with Gambizons, considering most of the best archer civs don't get access to it, Vikings being an infantry civ in this case gain a very nice complementary unit to their crossbows against a major counter. So that's our first big change, where I see the Swordsman-line buffs indirectly helping Vikings more than almost any other civilization. Moving on, the second major change was a whole set of improvements given to the Berserk. The biggest one is the effect of their unique tech Berserker Gang is now automatically given in Castle Age, meaning they heal 40 HP per minute instead of the previous 20. Practically speaking, this means a full heal that previously took 3 or 4 minutes is now always done in under 2 minutes, even for the elite version. In addition to healing up between fights, that even has a noticeable impact mid-fight, especially in Castle Age, where this wasn't previously available. For example, one-on-one, they heal 6 HP in a fight against a light cavalry, 10 HP against a knight, and 25 HP against a crossbow one-on-one. That extra HP gain fighting a knight especially now means with chieftains, they can sneak out a win one-on-one, which was not true before this patch, and makes them actually quite cost-effective. Of course, you also have to think about the cost of the tech that's being saved. Prior to the most recent patch, Berserker Gang cost a hefty 850 food and 400 gold, but is now totally free on top of being given 1 age earlier. Until now, you had not only the elite upgrade to pay for, but 2 different unique techs on top of blacksmith and barracks upgrades. Even just the research time of Berserker Gang alone set you back 3 berserks, so giving that tech automatically now means they're both better objectively in Castle Age, but also overall just easier to switch into. All this for a unit that was already considered pretty decent before this patch. That's not all though. They also had some changes to their Castle Age unique tech Chieftains, where aside from having its cost slightly reduced, adds on a brand new effect of having infantry units generate 5 gold per villager killed and 20 gold per enemy monk or trade cart. For a bit of context, managing to pick off 10 trade carts and 30 villagers sounds like a very effective raid for infantry, which remember is pretty slow, and adds up to just 350 gold, so the total gold doesn't sound that insane under usual circumstances. But the other way to look at it is a Berserk only needs to find 1 trade cart and 1 villager to recoup its entire gold cost. Remember, this applies to all Viking infantry though, so pikes and champions generate the same amount of gold as well. Altogether, between faster healing, erasing the cost for Berserker Gang, and the extra trickle of gold when raiding, there's several things here pushing Vikings toward being a true infantry civ, where infantry is actually your default, at least in 1v1s. At this point, the main problem I see is that infantry tends not to work very well in team games. And remember, Vikings already aren't doing very well in that department, which is typically dominated by cavalry and archers. It turns out though, Viking Arbalesters are also improved, and that'll be our third big change to look at. With Berserker Gang now automatically given to you, their new Imperial unique tech Bogsvegar adds +1 attack to the archer line. We'll do a few comparisons here, with Cyan representing archers without thumbring, the Arbalester in darker blue representing a civ with thumbring, and in yellow we have the Vikings, who while lacking thumbring have 11 attack instead of 10 thanks to this tech. Since thumbring increases the Arbalester's fire rate by just under 18%, and Arbalesters without thumbring have functionally about 94% accuracy from a quick test I ran, according to the math, our blue Arbalesters with thumbring should do better against units with 5 or less pierce armor. At 6 pierce armor, they should be about the same as Vikings, and after that point, Vikings should in fact do better until you reach 10 pierce armor, where the extra attack has no effect anymore, and at that point we'd want faster firing and better accuracy again. All this means there's a window of relatively high accuracy armor enemies that Vikings should end up better against now than they were even before losing thumbring. Of course, in practice, this probably undersells the importance of Vikings' focus firing requiring fewer shots, and instead overemphasizes damage over time, but we'll still look at a couple of quick examples to show how this plays out. To start with a pretty common example, here against an elite skirmisher, Viking Arbalesters in fact do the best one-on-one. Of course, this isn't cost-effective, especially when you consider gold, but I consider this a pretty important matchup for them to hold up in, and Vikings hands down did the most damage overall. Throw in some Viking champions with Gambazins, and you should be able to effectively neutralize any skirmishers used against you. Likewise, Vikings need a quarter fewer shots to bring down an onager, which even with a bit less accuracy missing thumbring could still mean the difference between the onager getting one more attack away and destroying half your army, or keeping your Arbalesters alive. As another example, Cavaliers with all the armor upgrades are just on that threshold, where thumbring and the Vikings +1 attack are theoretically very similar. This one comes down a bit to randomness in the Vikings' accuracy, but you can see it's almost indistinguishable in effectiveness. Likewise, against Paladins as well, you need theoretically a quarter fewer arrows, and especially in this matchup, shows they're at least as good as Arbalesters with thumbring, probably a little better when you consider focus firing and the fact you need 15 fewer arrows. Personally, I think that's a big deal in team games especially, where a Viking player going crossbows into Arbalester has jumped from what were substandard Arbalesters before to being now above average against Paladins in particular. Now, of course, there are a couple of downsides to all this, the first of which is that it costs more than thumbring and is definitely something to get after Bracer and Chemistry. In those moments, you really want a last push in your firepower. The other issue is you don't have access to it until Imperial Age, so your crossbows aren't anything special in the mid-game. Considering that's when Vikings were already doing well though, this seems like a well-targeted buff for Imperials specifically. So far, we've covered their infantry changes and how their late-game Arbalesters are now often as good or better than ones with thumbring. But there's one last change to deep dive, which is the secondary effect of their Imperial unique tech. In addition to archers, it also increases longboat attack by 1. This might sound excessive given Vikings' reputation and popularity on water maps, but in reality, it's not really a change. While this does give an indirect +1 attack improvement to regular longboats in Imperial, the elite longboat had this offset by reducing their hidden attack bonus against ships and buildings by 1. Basically, getting this tech just brings you back up to what they were before, at least against things they're usually fighting, which are enemy ships and docks. In fact, it's reasonable to wonder if it's even worth paying 1150 resources for it on a water map, where you aren't planning to use the extra attack for archers and are just thinking about your navy. We'll compare a couple of elite longboats here. The cyan one is without this tech, and the yellow elite longboat will be with this tech researched and spending the over 1000 resources, ideally hoping to see significantly better results. Checking out a couple of common matchups, the tech seems to give a noticeable but not amazing improvement. They take out galleons about 10% faster, setting them from almost exactly equal back to being a bit better than a generic galleon one-on-one. Likewise, there's a similar roughly 10% increase in effectiveness against fire ships, and as it happens, there's actually no impact against demos. Considering the elite upgrade is similarly priced and increases their attack much more as well as adding to their HP, Bogsvegar just seems like a very low priority, though if you're absolutely swimming in resources then it certainly won't hurt to pick up. I have to admit, I do like the idea of unique techs affecting both water and land units at once to make them overall more useful on any map. But in this case, it just feels like the game is selling you something that used to be free. So while it sounds like a buff, in my opinion, it's actually a slight nerf to the unit. So to give some final thoughts, while Vikings are basically unchanged in the early game, from Castle Age on, I'd argue on land they received some very nice improvements. The major takeaways again are first that longswords are more viable, especially to mix in against skirmishers to support your crossbows. Again, I think Vikings are a big beneficiary of a new tech that was purposefully not given to a lot of other civs who would have benefited in the same way. Second, the Berserk is unambiguously better, and for fun also has a unique raiding mechanic, now giving some extra flavor to the game. Third, the Arbalester is stronger in late Imperial, at least as good as ones with Thumbring, and especially when focus firing against high pierce armor targets, it should be a noticeable improvement. Finally, the Longboat was also slightly nerfed, now having higher upgrade costs, though I should point out that up until Imperial, they're as good as before on water, and considering the Berserk buffs, they might even be a little better on water maps, all things considered. Overall, if you're looking to embrace the devs' concerted push for infantry, I think Vikings are a great civ to try out, now more than ever. I've been playing them quite a bit this week, and am enjoying the Berserk changes in particular. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.